being courageous doesn't mean that you're brave. Being courageous means that you're willing to try things you don't know how to do. What I invite people to do is be courageous to just become first aware to the way you talk to yourself. Just become aware to it, number one, and just start acknowledging like, oh, wow, I think that same thing over and over again. That doesn't really serve me. Like just becoming aware, writing out what you're noticing about that will open your mind to so much possibility. You know, it's just taking that little bit of time to do something different.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Sparks of Gratitude podcast. I am your host, Randy Sparks, and we have an excellent conversation today with Becky Kemp. Welcome to the conversation.
Hi, Randy. So good to be here.
I can't tell you how excited I am. This has been a few weeks coming since you and I met, but let me tell everybody a little bit about Becky. So Becky is a speaker, coach, author, and just amazing human on her own journey to keep learning a little bit better how to be a more enlightened version of herself. And she has written a book, which we are going to talk about today, called The Word Effect: 7 Simple Words to Create Your Most Meaningful and Beautiful Life. I added a little bit of more color to that, but let me quote something that she says in this book, and this is going to give some foreshadowing into what our conversation is going to be. Becky says that words matter. They have the power to shape our thoughts and therefore our reality, which ultimately determines what kind of life we create. And I believe that, and I'm so excited to talk about this and learn about what are these 7 words, how did that change your life, and how that can change our life. So,
I'm excited to share. Thank you.
Well, before we hit the record button, that is, we had a fun conversation and talking about how both of us, who are we? We're both just on this journey trying to figure it out ourselves. But when we learn something, how beautiful it is that we can share it with somebody else. And you took some action and figured something out, and a framework that you can now teach to other people so that they can implement that. And you know what? It's just so fun. Look at this. I'm like, you need to see all the dog ears that I put in this book this morning. I don't know that I'll be able to even ask all the questions that I have from all the dog ears I put from reading your book. But one thing I love about your book is that you create a framework that's understandable and doable. And like at the beginning of the book, so you and I both have a common friend, Dr. Paul Jenkins.
Yes.
And I started reading your foreword, and I was one sentence in, and I'm like, that sounds like Dr. Paul Jenkins. And I flipped over. I'm like, yeah, it totally is. But he said this about you. He says, many of the processes going on in our mind are obvious once brought to our attention, but completely unnoticed up until that point. And so you are just revealing the obvious to us. And then all of a sudden it's hard to unknow what you've just revealed.
Yeah. I honestly feel like this book is a book of reminders. It's truth has been around since the beginning. Words have been around since the beginning. And as human beings, we're all looking for our next step to take. And I have found that words can be our compass. And I know that sounds maybe simple, but it really is simple. We use words to communicate. We use words to give us direction. We use words for everything. A lot of times we use words vocally, but we use words in our head too. That's how we have conversations with ourselves, is through the power of language. And so first becoming aware to your language and then more intentional, you're going to see that actually drives and directs your life more than you might recognize. So it's almost like, at least my experience was, I just stopped recognizing how powerful my words were. I was feeling stuck. I was wanting something to change in my life, and the change was within me. I had access and power to changing my life. A lot of times we look for an outside circumstance to change, something that we can't control, but we can control our words. And so it's a really powerful but simple approach. I would agree.
Yeah, and there's a lot in there where essentially there's so much accountability, awareness in seeing that And then once you can kind of grab a hold of that and say, I have the power, take that power and move forward. Oh, I mean, this is all in these 7 words. We're going to reveal what these 7 words are to everybody. I'm going to ask you to kind of fill them in. And my observation is going through these 7 words is that gratitude is just oozing through all of them.
Yes.
And that's why I loved it so much, of course, for this conversation too. So before I jump into that, I just want to thank everybody, speaking of gratitude and appreciation, for sharing your time with us today. If you're listening, you're watching this on YouTube, it matters. And we appreciate you so much. And it's been um, urging and encouraging me to keep doing this. And I've met so many wonderful people like Becky on this podcast. And it is changing my life. I tell everybody that gratitude changes and even saves lives. And so I appreciate you. And if you like this, please show us your gratitude by liking this or telling us why. But I'd love to hear your comments on it, or in your audio platform and your Apple Podcasts or anything. Go in there and comment on it. Tell us why. And then that bumps us up in the algorithm, and it helps us get more great guests like this. So, okay, Becky, I want to know a little bit more about what led up to you discovering the power of words.
Well, two things that come to mind. First off, when I was a little girl, I always had a desire to write a book and be a public speaker. And I wanted to be a media presence too. I would watch the journalists on TV, the broadcast women, and I think I want to do that. Yet, as I look back on my life, I never took any of the steps to achieve or accomplish any of those dreams. So I had these dreams and desires on my heart, but I never did anything to get them until I started to change my words. So about 10 years ago, I found myself really stuck, and I had been a full-time mom, and I had a lot of purpose there, but I had lost, I think, the essence of who I was. I probably lost staying in gratitude for the gifts I had been given. I was focused on everything I wasn't doing in my life. I just got in a kind of in a funk, I guess. And the simple thing was I had a kind of a spiritual experience, but I am a prayerful person. And one time I was praying to God, and I just said, in a simplistic way to share with your followers, I just said, God, I'm just not as happy as I think I want to be. And an impression came to me that just was change your words and you can change your story. Because I was kind of in that place where I was looking for other things to change, and then I'd be happy. We hear that, like, when I get the job, then I'll be, or when my kids do this, then I'll be. I had kind of fallen into that thought process. Like, when this happens, then I'll be. So I was always waiting to experience joy, or I mean, I'd have bouts of it, but I was always waiting for this or that to change. So that's kind of how, I got started on the journey. I started becoming aware to my words, and then what's fascinating is when you become aware to something, you start seeing it everywhere, and I've been tutored and taught, meeting, like you mentioned, Dr. Paul Jenkins. I, had no idea that my path was gonna cross with him, and I'd met him going to the National Speakers Association. Because as I started to change my words, I started to live the dreams that I always wanted and the desires. I have written a book. I am a public speaker. I do podcasts and have media opportunities. I'm still the same person, but I've just changed my words. And over time, these new opportunities have come into my life, and I can really appreciate them today, where before I had a harder time.
Okay, I imagine there's a lot deeper underneath that to get you to the point to say, okay, this is not working. What do I do? I mean, if you're in the dark depths of despair or something where you're finally kind of reaching out to last resort, higher power, and saying, what am I missing? What's going on? I also admire the fact that you seem to have been open enough to hear an answer. Change your words and you change your story.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because looking back, it's a lot easier. Like, it's easier for me to share it now, because hindsight's always 2020, right? We can look back and go, "Oh, we were being led here," or "This experience led me here." I think in the moment, I didn't have that clear vision of it, but I just it started me thinking. I started noticing how powerful phrases were. I started noticing how powerful small sentences were. At this same time, I began working a 12-step program, and, 12-step recovery is a gift, I think, and a lot of people work 12-step recovery programs for lots of different reasons, and I started noticing as I was introduced to some 12-step work that I needed some help with. There was small little phrases, and they were so powerful to me. When you get overwhelmed and you want to act out or you want to use something, that little phrase like "easy does it" or "just for today," those are like some of the slogans and sayings that you'll hear a lot through 12-step recovery, but you can use them anywhere. They would I would say them to myself and they would help me, like, remember, "Oh, yeah, 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 wait, I'm gonna do it this way today. I'm not gonna go down this path. I'm gonna try something different." They would help me redirect, and so that was a big part right at this time. It was like then I feel like God was just showing me, like, "Look at these little phrases," and what I love about it, Randy, is that it doesn't have to be these long quotes and long things. Not that they're bad, but like just little phrases, even just a word at a time can help you stay maybe headed in the direction you want because there's just a lot of noise and a lot of distraction in life. And we can lose our vision. We can lose where we're headed. And I think that's where I was. I just kind of lost the vision of where I was headed and who I was to become. And changing my words has helped me get back on track. Do I still struggle at times? Yes. I mean, I'm the first client to myself, right? Like, I was speaking yesterday for a bunch of mortgage and, real estate professionals, and, driving there, I felt anxious, and I felt like, "Who am I to be coming and talking to them about this?" Right? And I felt that, and I had to just kind of use what I've learned to walk me through it, but it went fine, and then I have to move on, right? Like, so I'm still a human with it. Sometimes I think people think that I just think happy thoughts all the time and nothing happens, and it's not like that.
Yeah, that's interesting, just the phenomenon of that, where you have, a framework that works for you, which, I mean, am I right that all of this is something that you came up with and you're saying, "Oh, well, this is something I can do for me,
Yes.
and this is helping me. This is a process, this is a model, this is something that you're your own experiment, and you're doing this for yourself." And then at some point you say, "Oh, well, this is a framework that works. Maybe I write it down. Maybe I kind of formalize the model and then share it with people." But
Yeah.
you never stop. It's for you all along.
Yes. And
So
if I
it's
get
not
to
like,
help other people, that's a bonus, right? But it's a framework that helps me. And this is back to what I said from a young age. I always wanted to write a story or write a book, and I always wanted to be a speaker. But you know what would get me stuck? Is I'd think, I don't have a good story to share. I don't have a good message. Like, I don't have what would I share on? Like, I was always at a loss of what I would share. And then through this journey, about 3 or 4 years into kind of discovering words, being tutored with words, figuring that out, I finally invested in myself and hired a coach and it acknowledged out loud, which is the first power word of my book, but acknowledged out loud that I did want to write a book. And then I found this lady that was teaching people to write a book, be a speaker, and media personality. It was like as soon as I started to acknowledge it, it's like the windows of heaven just kind of started to open up. And I was on a walk one day. It was one evening I was trying to figure out what I was gonna write on. I knew by that point I wanted to write on the power of words. I think that a lot of times people share what something that was a weakness and how they've learned to overcome it. And so it just became clear. So I just asked myself, what were the steps I had to take to get to this point? And these words started coming to me. And I refined them over time. And of course, I made them all A's and to kind of, like there was little things. I didn't have to do that, but that's just how it kind of came. And that was kind of the framework, and then I built it around, yeah, my own experiences. But so it's fascinating now because I used to always think, "What would I speak on?" And now I speak on, yeah, the framework and things that have helped me, and then I'm like, "Hey, if it helps me, maybe it can help you." And that's what I love to offer to people because we all have access to words. Every single person does.
So I love that awareness of becoming aware of your words. I mean, this is the first chapter of your book, so I want to get into this and let people know. Well, what are we waiting for? What in the heck are these words that people get
Yes.
back into? First of all,
Yes.
you guys can get the book. I mean, there it is, the word effect, and it's worth reading. I
Yeah.
love talking
Get
about
it
that.
on Amazon or it's through my publisher, leadershipbooks.com.
Yeah, and we'll put the link in there so everybody can get a copy of this. And I'd love to hear you. One of the things I love about this is becoming aware of the power of words and just being aware of that. That there's such a power in those words, and then what do we do? What is this model? And I'll let you describe the model, and I'll try not to jump in too much. I'm just excited about it. But maybe tell us about becoming aware of your words before we jump into what are these words that can get us on this model, this spiral upwards.
Yeah, the word effect, yeah. Well, before anyone changes, you have to decide that you want to change. There has to be a desire to change. I'm sure you see that with gratitude. People have to decide what they're getting maybe isn't what they want, and they have to have a desire to do something different. And you offer gratitude, right? It's for all of us. And so, why that's the beginning chapter is before I can share about the power of words, I want people to even consider, do words matter? Is there an effect with words? Why would I want to listen to this? Why would this be relevant to me? And so I've just come to learn that before anything happens in any of our lives, we have to become aware that we wanna change, you know? A lot of times at the end of the year, people start thinking about New Year's resolutions because we're used to January about change. Well, nobody sets a New Year's resolution that they aren't aware that they wanna become better at it or they want to improve. Generally, there is an awareness something that I'm lacking or something I wanna improve upon, even if it's like, I wanna read more this year, you have an awareness, like, I don't really take that much time to read. So, I just tell people start to become aware to words so that they can form their own concepts of how words matter to them. That's why it's a framework because I'm not telling you how to live, I'm just saying become aware to your words this serves as a reminder and then let these words that you have access to see how they can springboard your life. This is how my life's been springboarded. Our stories will be different, but the principles and truth are the same.
So you say something, especially kind of shrinking things down to simple phrases,
Mhm.
ditch willpower for word power.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is where it begins.
Yeah. When I was kind of at my low point, I had been a person that lived in willpower, in that push and in that, like, drive energy, and I'm very, I it could be a gift and a curse, I guess, but when I put my mind to something, a lot of times, I will keep going forward until I accomplish it. The problem is I don't always put my mind to the right things, and if I do think it's too hard, a lot of times I will fail ahead of time instead of trying. I lack the ability to try. So a lot of times I would say, "I'm not gonna do that because I don't think I can do it as well." So that's why when I was younger, I didn't pursue any of my dreams because they seemed too unobtainable, so I just kept them over there. And so what I've come to realize is that a lot of us live in that hustle of willpower, like I've got to push more. And we look at it like a linear line, and that we just have to keep pushing more and we got to wake up earlier and we have to fight harder. And I just have come to realize that's not the best way for me. Word power is more of a circular and an ease and a flow, and it's something that I have access to, and when I find myself getting stuck or there's obstacles, I can pull some words that help me keep moving forward instead of just pushing through. So yeah, it was a different way of thinking.
Oh, I love it. So let's get on to the very first word here. I mean, that there's so much good stuff in here. Okay. So let's start with number one, acknowledge.
Yeah. Again, once you find an awareness, the first step is acknowledging you want to change, acknowledging you want improvement. For me, I want people to understand acknowledging your dreams out loud is very powerful. Acknowledging your hopes, acknowledging what you want out of life, saying things out loud, there's a real power. There's a lot of research behind the power of words that I didn't have to do. People had already done for me and how powerful words are. We hear a lot about manifesting. We hear a lot about being vision, having a vision, but if you want to break through and change your life, you have to have a vision of what you want to get to first. Most anyone that's successful had to first think it and then it was created. I mean, even for you, you didn't just probably wake up one day and say, I'm going to start a podcast. You probably started thinking about it first, right?
Yeah, too
That's
long.
how powerful. And most of us do. Most of us think too long. I do too, but we have to think it before we create it. We have to acknowledge it, and then we start to acknowledge those things. So that's the simplicity of acknowledge, is just writing things down, sharing them, asking yourself, I was surprised where I found myself. I didn't know what I wanted to do and what I wanted to become. I had stopped acknowledging my dreams. I just kind of pushed them to the side, like, nope, you're not going to come with me. And they were right there with me because they're put on our hearts for a reason.
Yeah, I like how you say acknowledge. Acknowledge is just saying, okay, here it is. It exists. Like, what
Exactly.
is it that I want? Um, and then it frees you to move on to the next of the seven words.
Yeah.
Um, and
One of the Let me just add one thing really quick that I feel like I should say. Even just acknowledging things that are hard for you is really powerful. Instead of just when someone says, "How are you doing?" Most of us say, "I'm fine. How are you?" But even learning to say, "Oh, I'm having a hard day today," and just acknowledging your truth is so incredibly powerful. I can't tell you. But we fall into these traps that we like say back what we think other people want to hear, or we don't wanna it's hard to be vulnerable. So acknowledging is learning to be vulnerable, be seen, be authentic to who you are. You don't have to be original, you just have to be authentic. Like, who are you? And discovering that. So, one little tip I would share is if you're struggling to even acknowledge, start by writing things out. Get stuff, it's called a brain dump. I do this when I coach clients, but get stuff out of your head on paper. Give that all that thought a place to land. It frees up your brain for a little bit. So, like, you can do a thought download with all the negative things that you're struggling with or all the hopes that you have. Like, you can do both. But I find that when I get stuff out of my head on piece of paper and just by acknowledging it there, it gives it a place for when I'm ready to work on it, and it frees me up from that anxious loop in my head trying to carry all those thoughts. I'm not really sure why it works, but it works. And so there's a real power in getting stuff out and sharing it even on a piece of paper to start with, and then learn to share it with others.
yeah, it sounds extremely liberating to just acknowledge that it exists. I do feel like this,
Yeah.
independent of what the feeling is.
Yes, it helps you be seen of yourself, right? We would always see other people, but we don't take the time to let ourselves be seen. So if I'm worried about something, if I'm trying to make a decision, if I want to do this or this, it's not like a right or wrong decision. Acknowledging it, getting it out of my head, looking at the pros and cons on paper is so much better for me to make decisions than looping it in my head, right? And then talking to other people about it. So it's just a vulnerability piece that I think a lot of us maybe have forgotten is, and we just have access to it. And again, it's free. It's right at your fingertips. You can write stuff down and throw it away. Nobody has to see it until you're ready. You know what I mean? And so it is something maybe people would like to try.
That is nice, and you give a good framework for people to prompts to say, "Okay, now here's how we can go through some steps of
Try
this
some things.
acknowledgement," and then Something that I see as a theme too in each of these words is, and for acknowledge, you notice it too, is courage. And
Yeah.
you say acknowledging your weaknesses gives you the courage to step out of fear and
Mhm.
into authenticity, which brings incredible power. So I love that all these kind of hack open the courage of possibility.
Yeah,
And step
yeah, I
here.
mean, being courageous doesn't mean that you're brave. Being courageous means that you're willing to try things you don't know how to do. And what I invite people to do is be courageous to just become first aware to the way you talk to yourself and just become aware to it. Number 1, and just start acknowledging like, "Oh, wow, I think that same thing over and over again. That doesn't really serve me." Like just becoming aware, writing out what you're noticing about that will open your mind to so much possibility, you know? It's just taking that little bit of time to do something different. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. That's where I was before I found the power of words. I would keep pushing and doing the same thing, and I would keep hitting my head in the into the wall, going, "Why do I keep doing this?" But I wasn't changing anything. I was hoping something else would change. It was when I started to acknowledge and look at myself, then it was like a light bulb just kinda started to turn on ever so slow, it wasn't too fast, to just enlighten me of, "Oh, maybe try different. Maybe do this," but it all starts by acknowledging.
Well, and then that awareness and acknowledging that then leads to the next, which is
Yes,
to ask,
yes,
right?
yes.
And so what is ask? What's the significance of that? And 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 how? Because you say, the power word of ask inspires curiosity and it
Yeah.
invites change.
Yes, and that's the key, it invites change. So, one of the feelings that we really wanna step into is feeling curious. As you feel curious, it will give you the ability to ask better questions. A lot of times people don't wanna change because they don't wanna let people know they don't know how to do it. It's hard
Never
to
done
admit.
that.
Me either, but I've heard, you know? But
Yeah.
I'll just go back to writing a book. I had to work with a coach that had done it, and she helped me stay accountable, and she helped me keep moving forward. When I got to the process of editor, I hired an editor to help me, to take what I wrote and help me make sure it was cohesive. We don't have to be good at everything. We have to find what we're good at and then let other people who are good at other things help us. But learning to ask better questions. So when our brain's a processor and our brain is doing what we tell it to do, honestly. And so that's what's so fascinating about this to me is we can change where we direct our brain. Oftentimes when something happens to us, we like to ask the question, why is this happening to me? And when you ask yourself that subconsciously or verbally, your brain tends to focus on negative, and your brain goes, "Oh, let me show you more negative." And it shows you, "Oh, yeah, this is an obstacle. Let me show you another obstacle. Let me make this obstacle feel bigger." It's a fascinating way of as you start to learn this. If you change and ask, "How? How do I step through this? How do I keep moving forward?" It actually gives our brain a job, not to be negative, but to find solutions. It's like, "Okay, there is a roadblock right here, or there's a detour right here, but I've told my brain I want to find a solution." So, I ask myself all the time, how do I write a book? How do I take this next step? What does that look like? So asking how keeps me moving forward with the dream or whatever I acknowledge. Even if it's something that's hard. How do I overcome this? How do I keep moving forward? As you start to ask how, it gives you the ability to stay curious. Curiosity is a feeling that gives us the opportunity to innovate and just continue to be creative.
Well, and you've even gone further to take the power of how, the word how,
Yes.
and
Yes.
turning it into an acronym for asking better questions. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so HOW stands for the H is honesty, learning to be honest, and that's just vulnerable with yourself, right? Like, honestly, who am I today? The O is open-mindedness, to change. You have to become open to new ideas, other ideas, and the W is the willingness to try them. So most often when I look back at my life, I was my biggest roadblock to creating the life I wanted. It wasn't anyone else but me because I had a hard time being honest. I had a hard time being open minded and I had a hard time being willing to try something else. Have you ever heard of a suggestion or an idea and thought, that's not going to work before you even try it? I mean, I do that all the time. Even in my marriage, my husband, we think differently. We have different ideas. We see the world differently at times. Sometimes he has an idea, and before I even want to give it a chance, I'm like, no, it's not going to work. Right. And I shut it down right there. Instead of going, I'm going to stay curious. Maybe this could work. I'm going to try it. And if we don't like it, we can always go back. Right. It's not so often we think our decisions are black or white, yes or no. And it's like, oh, I'm trying this for a while. And then, oh, that's not working. So I'm going to try something else.
I notice that when I react that way, if I'm open, honest with myself and aware,
Yes.
when I'm in that mindset, I notice that the reason I'm judging something so quickly, no, that will not work. Or part it's all my problem. It's all my unwillingness to be curious. It's
Yes.
my judgment of someone else, and it's my fear of failure, and sometimes even my fear of success.
Yes.
So that I'm like, no, like I shut something down because I'm unwilling to face the 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 work, the the discomfort of what that new thing may be, and it's so much easier for me to reject.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times it's because we're not perfect at it right now, right? That's why people don't ask questions because a lot of times they don't want people to see that they don't know the answer. It's hard to ask questions to say, I thought that would work, but maybe it's not going to. I have to still practice this and be willing to ask questions because even as I'm a leadership speaker and intentional language expert, I still have to ask questions. I don't know everything about everything, and I still make decisions sometimes and then go, "Oh, maybe what did I learn from that?" Maybe next time try something different. So I think it's a lifelong skill. And it's a word, like I said, these are circular words that keep us moving forward. So when you're finding yourself stuck, you can go, okay, what kind of questions am I asking? Am I even asking questions? You can just start to be curious. But a lot of times if we ask different questions, we'll keep ourselves moving.
Yes, and you said something so wonderful in your book about that. I mean, we're talking about this fear of perfectionism or failure. You said when we pressure ourselves with perfectionism, we kill all abundant thought,
Hmm.
and our curiosity is just not possible. So I'm skipping ahead there, guys.
Yep.
About
But they go
what's the next
together.
words?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but so we've gone from acknowledge to ask, and asking how instead of why, and then that brings us to the next word, which is accept.
Accept. Yes.
Okay, so let's learn
First
about
and
that.
foremost, we have to acknowledge, we ask, and then we accept. And what I mean by that is we get to learn to accept we're exactly where we are today and accept where we are. So I was just saying to someone yesterday at this speaking engagement, I started my career later in life. I was a full time mom. And every once in a while, I use that against me. And I think things like, oh, if I would have started this in my 20s, if I would have started speaking and writing in my 20s, look how much further I'd be. I'm 49 today. I'm not ashamed to admit my age, but I sometimes think I wish I would have started this sooner because I kind of started this journey in the last 10 years and really writing and speaking in the last 4 or 5 years. But that does me no good. It does me no good to live in the past like that because I cannot change it. And so what I've had to learn to do is accept, no, I made those choices and they were the right choices then. I can go back to appreciating and being grateful that I was able to be a full-time mom. I am able to be a mother. I was able to be experiencing all the things in my kids' lives. And now today This is what I get to do. So it just we get to learn to accept where we're at and who we are today. Because if we're always in the past and we're looking to the past and wishing we would have changed it, we live in a lot of regret. And if we focus too much in the future, it causes us to have a lot of anxiety. So when we learn to stay in today and accept where we're at and accept things are as they are today, it frees us in tremendous ways.
Right.
So
So we
how
ask
we
ourselves the question, what, instead of what if,
Mhm.
what is,
Yeah.
and accept what is. And so
Right.
here's a struggle that I have that other people may share is the paradox of accepting what is when I want to be something better than what I am now,
Yeah.
right? But if I'm accepting what is now, isn't that negating or working against what I want to become? And this is what I think there's this beauty in this paradox of once I do accept, then now I am free to become that.
Yes. Yes, it is different than what we've learned, in living. It's finding acceptance. So I mentioned I've done a lot with 12-step recovery in the last 10 years, and there's a lot about acceptance. So often we fight against who we become to this day. And so we feel like we can never change. We can never fix things. And there's changes possible for all of us. But it's when you accept, "This is exactly where I'm at." Again, if you're always looking to your past, you're in regret. It causes depression. It causes, a lot of shame oftentimes, a lot of feelings that aren't really, conduits for creation. And so how I discovered acceptance in my own life when I became aware to the power of words and was starting to like become open to it. I was watching a Netflix documentary and it happened to be around food. But I remember, I couldn't even tell you the documentary, but I'll never forget there was this suggestion made because a lot of people that struggle with body image or self worth, they have a hard time accepting who they are at that moment. So they were talking about that and they gave this suggestion. Take a little, well, they didn't say to take a little piece of paper, but say these words to yourself. I accept myself unconditionally right now. I was listening to it and those words caught my attention. So I paused it, I rewound it, and they said, say them to yourself every morning, middle of the day, and the evening for so many days and see what it does to you. Well, I had to actually stop that and go, I can't even remember that phrase because I wasn't in a place of accepting myself unconditionally. I was in a place of beating myself up and not talking nice to myself. I'd never talk that way to other people, but we can have a lot of subconscious negativity. So I decided to get a 3 by 5 card and wrote, I accept myself unconditionally right now on this card. I put it in my bathroom mirror. And I think I shared this in my book, but I started saying those words to myself every day. And what I learned is you say them to yourself, whether you mean it or you don't mean it. You just start putting those words in your life. And over time, you know what happened? I began to accept myself unconditionally right now. And that always gets me back into the present moment. And I still use that phrase to this day. When I start feeling anxious about the future, when I start feeling regret about maybe a decision I made before or something, I always start saying that to myself and it pulls me back into the day and it gives me a lot of freedom to be like, okay, I'm I'm okay. If I wanna make a different decision another time, I can, but I'm okay. And so that's what I feel like words do. Like I said, they're a compass to kinda redirect us. And so that's another phrase. If someone's struggling, just start saying to yourself, I accept myself unconditionally right now. Write it on a piece of paper so you can remind yourself. Make it your screensaver. Start saying it and you'll become it, over time. Your life will change, your mind will change with it, and acceptance is a really powerful way to keep moving forward.
Okay, everybody, there's our invitation for the day. And let's repeat this. And so say this once again, Becky. I accept myself.
I accept myself unconditionally right now. So the right now gets us back into today. It puts the power back within us, and I accept myself unconditionally. It's a lot of love and gratitude for who I am and where I am today. Now, the freedom of it is it doesn't mean that we can't change our decisions. It doesn't mean that we can't progress. And like you mentioned, you want to aspire to over here and you're here. And so we think, well, if I accept myself, then I'm not being driven. It's not that. When you accept yourself, you naturally want to keep moving forward and you're accepting that I don't have to go faster than I have strength, or I'm going to learn this and then it's going to teach me this. And you live in a more, well, word power kind of life instead of that willpower push. I'm not good enough that tends to hold a lot of us back.
And you know what I believe that acceptance also primes me for is to see abundance.
Yes.
I mean, it becomes so obvious and smooth to see how your 7 words kind of
Yeah.
lead from one to the next. But
Yeah.
but but now I'm prepared to see the abundance. Now, for
Yes.
example, when I think of this acceptance of myself unconditionally right now, what I learned from practicing that mindset, that thought, that truth is accepting myself and loving myself with all my perceived flaws and everything. Okay. Well, if I can accept myself like that, then I can receive someone else's love like that. Then I can accept someone else like that and I can love them as they are as well. Right. And then because of that, I'm able to see abundance. And so talk to me about abundance. So this is our
Yeah.
next word.
So abundance is the fourth word. Like you said, you're going to see that these words just naturally fall into place. They kind of keep you going, but once you find acceptance, then you take your dreams, desires, you take where you're at and you focus on abundant thinking. And what I talk about with abundance is getting out of perfectionism and focusing more on progress. So often we focus on being good right now and we don't give ourselves credit for the progress we are making. I mean, you and I got up and we are breathing again today. Like what a gift, you know? We don't even have to think about that, right? We should be so grateful for the day we have ahead of us. But it's really easy to get mired down in our negative thoughts. And so abundant thinking is something you have to tune into. You have to think about a radio. Back in the day, you would have to when I was a little girl, I had a radio that you had to turn the dial to get it to the right station, and I like to listen to 97.1, and if it was on 97.2 or 3 or just under 97.1, it was maybe on, 97, you couldn't hear it, and it was static, but once you got it tuned in, beautiful music would come out or whatever song I liked at the time. It's the same with abundant thinking. It's something that I really believe you have to tune into every single day. And that's that gratitude piece. And I talk a lot about gratitude in abundant thinking. And then when I talk about the sixth power word is appreciate. But why we have to tune into abundant thinking is I can feel really grateful for yesterday, but today I can forget. I can forget. I can see God's hand in my life yesterday and today I can go, where are you? And so I have to tune into it. And so I like to help people see that you have to practice this. The power of words is easy to use, but it is a practice that you have to put a little bit of energy. Even just 15 minutes a day will change your life. Like it doesn't have to be a lot, but you have to practice thinking abundantly. You have to practice thinking that there's possibility. You have to practice looking for the good. Because when you practice seeing the good and looking for the good, a beautiful thing happens. You start to see more good and it multiplies.
I love that. And then this is where abundance, the two next power words, abundance and appreciation, but I think they just empower us to transcend beyond fear and perfectionism into possibility and curiosity and hope and joy, right? And out of um, a victim mentality and into possibility and abundance. And
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's a choice. Like we get to choose our words
Yeah. We get
and
to
and
choose where we focus.
and practice choosing them, like you said, because even yesterday, or you were going to a speaking engagement, and your self talk was different. Like,
Yes.
so I have people talk to me because I've got this podcast and so on. They assume I'm this gratitude guru.
Yes.
Well, no, I'm not. I value the principle and practice of gratitude, and it's impacted my life. And I struggle with it, and I have to continue to try living with the choice of gratitude.
Yeah. So what I loved what you just said is I do have this skill set of offering ideas about gratitude, and I still need to try. So one of the things that we want to focus on with abundant thinking is focusing on the ands in our life instead of the buts. Because when we say, I, am a public speaker, but I'm not as successful as I want to be, that's a scarce thinking. That's a scarcity tactic that our brain uses to protect us. Instead, I want to be thinking, I I'm a prepared speaker and I'm offering value. Like when I come at that place, it's an abundant and it's light and it's fun and it's easy. It's normal to get nervous. It's normal to kind of get anxious. If you're passionate about something and you didn't get nervous at times or anxious, you probably don't care as much about it. What I realized is why I was feeling some nerves yesterday is I have so much I want to share and I had 45 minutes. And so I had to really hone in on what message did these people at this moment, how could I make their lives better for having given me 45 minutes of them because everybody's time is so important. So as I was putting a little bit of pressure on myself, but really it was because I felt like I wanted to share with them this gift. And so when I got back into abundant thinking and thinking, and I've prepared and I'm gonna connect with them, it was a lot easier. So focusing on our ands instead of our buts is something we get to practice. But you'll find it's easy to focus on the buts, the what ifs, instead of the what is, right? And so it is a practice. And the more we practice it, the easier it becomes. The more we practice it, it becomes a part of us, just like any good habit.
Okay, and then that brings us into action. I think the practice is taking action.
Yes.
So we've got a few more words here. So
Yeah.
action.
So the fifth word is action. And again, I teach how to take action not from a place of willpower and push, but more from a place of feeling. So when you feel committed to something, you show up differently and you take different actions than if you feel overwhelmed to something. So it's just becoming aware to our words and taking action consistently. So I love this story, but if you were given 1 penny that would double in value for 31 days, or I was gonna give you $3,000,000 on the first day, and you could choose, what would you choose?
Well, I know the answer to this one,
Yeah.
but let's see. I mean, the
Well, the
second one sounds way better.
Yeah, I don't have to do any work. I mean, I get my $3,000,000 today and I'm guaranteed it, right? But what we know is 1 penny comes to 2 pennies, 2 pennies comes to 4, and you're thinking, okay, there's no way that's going to amount to anything. But if you do the math, by the time you get to the 30th day, you have gone above, I think you're like at $4.5 million. And by the 31st day, you're at close to $10 million with that 1 penny. So, though the $3 million is not a small amount of change, what that principle shows is that action is consistent. It's learning how to show up to your dreams, desires consistently, doing your 1%, doing just a little bit every day. It's a much better approach than just getting all of it done in that push energy. So that always reminds me, like, what's my 1%? What am I doing? What's my 1 penny today that's starting to double and to multiply and starting to move the dial forward? Because I think as human beings, we all want to become better. We all want to improve. That's just a innate ability of humans, I think, to give and to serve. But we don't have to do it at the cost of our, mental capacity.
Yeah, and I think that prevents me certainly and many people from moving forward is expecting that it all needs to be done in one
Yeah,
big bang. But it's
yeah.
What if I just took one step?
Yeah.
And then what if I took one more? And
Yeah.
then what if I just kept going? And then I look back and a year later I say, wow, a year ago, I didn't have a book. A year ago, I didn't have a podcast. And now look where it is. A year ago, and then what had that all added up to? So there's your action, the consistent
Yes.
action. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
And now we've come to appreciate.
Appreciate. And that goes hand in hand with gratitude. I like to say, whatever you appreciate appreciates. So if you appreciate your job, it's going to appreciate you. If you appreciate your family, they're going to appreciate you. And it grows because we know when we put money in the bank and we want it to appreciate, it's gaining in value. It's the same with anything else. Whatever you appreciate is going to appreciate. It's going to gain value. Might not be monetary value, but value in where you're at. You have to take time to appreciate the things around you because if you don't, they stop appreciating. And so the best way I've found to do that is through a practice of gratitude, a practice of being grateful for where I'm at. So it's the beginning of the new year. We've started 2025, and I tend to set goals and have aspirations for the year. And then my brain starts trying to figure out how I'm going to accomplish them all. And I can get overwhelmed really easily. But when I get back into today and I accept where I'm at, and it's only, the beginning of January, and I appreciate what is happening. I appreciate I get to be on this podcast today. Anytime I get to share this message, it fills me up. Everything's good. Everything's good. And so just that practice of pausing for a minute instead of looking at the big picture, appreciating what's right in front of you, there's always enough and your cup will run over. But it's that scarcity mindset of like, there's not enough that tends to make us stop appreciating and then we don't see the value in what is happening in front of us.
And what type of practices do you implement or have you to focus on that gratitude and appreciation?
Yeah, I've done gratitude lists where at night I like to write down 10 things that I'm grateful for and just have a little gratitude notebook. I've done that before, but you know what I do a lot right now? Just it's a super easy practice for me. But when I feel myself getting overwhelmed, I take a deep breath and I just appreciate that I can breathe. And then I appreciate, like, I look out at my horizon. So maybe I'm driving and I'm feeling overwhelmed. And I think, oh, I appreciate the Wasatch Mountains because I live in Utah and they're beautiful. Or I appreciate the sunlight. Yesterday I was driving and it's cold here in Utah, right? And it's winter time, but the sun was like, it was bright and I could feel the warmth of the sunlight. And I just paused for just a minute and I appreciated the sunlight at 3:30 in the afternoon when I was taking my son to the gym. And I was like, "Oh, it's so warm. It feels so good." And yes, I was in my car and I had my sweater on. No, but so pausing and appreciating through your life. So I would say a gratitude journal one, but even more so just pausing and appreciating your surroundings, appreciating, I'm appreciating that we're having this conversation right now. Pausing and doing that. So it can be a simple thing. Sometimes I think we think I have to do this big grandiose thing. And so that's overwhelming to someone that's already overwhelmed. Like, I can't start another practice of this and that because I'm already failing at, X, Y, and Z. And so it's just looking at your horizon. What am I grateful for right here?
Yeah, and for what is it's all tied together. It's that acceptance, and then all of a sudden you see the abundance through the appreciation.
Yes.
It all kind of feeds on itself.
Weave. Weaves together. Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
It does.
I love it. And then this brings us to your final power word to put on. And something
Yeah.
that I haven't talked about yet in all of this is you use the language, you use words to say put on these power words.
Yes.
Like as we're clothing ourselves in something, like we're covering ourselves in these words. And so this is the other word to put on, which is to aspire.
Yeah, yeah. And the reason I talk about aspire and I'll share why I talk about putting on words is 10 years ago when I started to discover the power of words, I started a positive t-shirt and apparel business called Becoming Threads. That was an idea that came to me. I started seeing the value of words, and I wanted to put a positive message on my shirt to go sit at my son's baseball game. I couldn't find the shirts, and I had the idea, "Why don't you make some?" And I figured out how to make 'em. I didn't produce them myself as far as, like, make that, but I found a company to print them and different things, and me and my sister-in-law, Erin, we started this business, Becoming Threads. And what I really saw is that every day I could walk into my closet and choose the words I physically put on, and they served as a reminder. If I had a shirt that said "Grateful Heart," it served as a reminder throughout the day to be grateful, and other people would see it and say, "Oh, thanks for that message. I needed that today." You just never know what influence you're gonna have. And so what I've come to realize is you don't necessarily need a t-shirt, though it's nice to remind you. Take a few minutes and have a practice of asking yourself, what words are you gonna put on? Why aspire is the last word is this process is just what I believe we're all becoming. It's never done. You learn these 7 words, and then whatever comes into your life, you can put this framework to the test and work it. Aspiring means you've up leveled. Aspiring means that you have learned something, and so when the next obstacle comes, because it will come, or when the next dark cloud comes, you have a process to keep you moving forward. When the next new idea comes and you think, like, it sounds like you have a desire to write a book. You had a desire to do the podcast and you've done that, and now maybe you have this next desire. Now you've aspired to, okay, now what do I need to do? What did I learn from doing this that I can take these principles moving forward? So that's what aspiring means to me, is continuing forward. It's never ending. That actually gives me a lot of hope, because then we're just constantly improving upon ourselves. There's not like a finish line, right? It's just we're experiencing life. We're finding joy in the journey of life.
There we have it, folks. Joy in the journey. And we have a framework to do that
Yes.
by, change our words and we change our story, right?
Yeah.
Choose our words, clothe ourselves in those words, put these words on, and we can change our life, change our story. Um,
Yes.
I'm so happy we got to have this conversation today and that I could read your book. I told my wife this morning, I said, "You're really gonna like this book." And she said, "Why?" And I'm like, "You'll see." I didn't tell her anything. So, but
Uh,
she's gonna have to go through all my notes and my dog ears. But
that's
but
okay.
I am confident that everybody listening has gotten something helpful from this. And I encourage everybody to get this book, The Word Effect by Becky Kemp, and change your words and change your story, everybody. Becky, I am so excited for you and for whatever your next adventure is that you're aspiring to. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you for letting me. It's great.
Okay, everybody, we'll see you next time.